They laughed at the quiet old man in the diner until he took off his jacket. They walked into the diner laughing, three loud young men looking for breakfast and someone to belittle. What they didn't expect was that their target would be the very man who once carried this country on his back. And when the truth came out, it wasn't the veteran who walked away in shame. It was them. The sun was just beginning to warm the sidewalks of Bakersfield, California. Lou's diner sat tucked on the corner of 19th and H, wedged between a boarded-up hardware store and a building barely holding on. The neon sign outside buzzed and blinked, but nobody came for the lights. They came because it felt like home. Inside, the scent of bacon grease clung to the walls, mixing with fresh biscuits and old memories. The booths were worn, some patched with duct tape. Faded photos of high school football teams lined the walls, alongside yellowed newspaper clippings and a crooked American flag above the counter. It wasn't fancy, but it was familiar. Every Sunday at exactly 8:10 a.m., Eugene Marshall would quietly push through the door. No spectacle, no chatter, just a respectful nod and a soft, "Morning, Lou." Even though Lou hadn't owned the place in over a decade, he always chose the same booth, second one by the window. Enough sunlight to warm the table, enough distance to be left alone. He wore an old olive green army jacket, not for show, but because it still felt like his skin. On the back, just beneath the collar, was a hand-stitched patch. 101 Saint, Screaming Eagles. Some folks thought he wore it for attention. Truth was, it was the only thing that still fit him right after all these years. Eugene was 78. His back was straighter than his knees, and though arthritis had begun to steal his steps, his presence was still sharp. The regulars knew what he wanted: black coffee, no sugar, no cream, and a slice of apple pie, slightly burnt around the edges, just the way he liked it. Luis, the 26-year-old son of the current owner, always looked out for him, tossed in a little extra apple when no one was watching. Eugene once joked, "Boy, if your kitchen had legs, I'd marry it." They'd laugh for 5 minutes straight. It was a slow morning. A few regulars, a mother juggling her toddler, and an old man enjoying his grits. Eugene stirred his coffee. The pie arrived. He took one bite, leaned back, and for a few seconds he was somewhere else, somewhere quieter, somewhere younger. Then the door slammed open. Three young men burst in, loud and full of themselves. Mid-20s, sneakers, chains, and oversized egos. One blasted music from a Bluetooth speaker. Another wore a thick jacket despite the heat. And the third, Troy Delaney, the loudest, had that kind of smirk that made you want to look away. They weren't here to eat. They were here to be seen. They made their way through the diner, cracking jokes loud enough for everyone to hear. When Troy's eyes landed on Eugene, he grinned. "Yo, y'all see Grandpa G.I. Joe over here?" he said, pointing at Eugene's jacket. "Bet he stormed Normandy with a walker." His buddies laughed. "Man probably thinks we're still on war rations," another added. Eugene didn't flinch. He stirred his coffee and took another sip. Luis leaned out from the kitchen window, jaw tight. He was watching. Troy strutted to Eugene's table and leaned down. "What's with the get-up, old man? Playing dress-up?" Eugene looked up, calm but clear. "You boys got nothing better to do?" Reggie, the jittery one, jumped in. "Yo, tell us a story, Grandpa. Did you body slam Hitler or just iron his shirts?" The third, Darnell, stayed by the jukebox, pretending he wasn't part of it. But everyone knew. They traveled in threes, one to provoke, one to echo, one to act innocent. Luis stepped out from the kitchen, walking slowly toward the booth. Troy raised an eyebrow. "Who are you supposed to be?" Luis didn't answer. "Do you even know who this man is?" he asked, voice low. Troy scoffed. "Yeah, some dusty old vet who thinks the world owes him something." That's when the room shifted. A man by the window spoke up. "That man saved my cousin's life in Nam." A woman at the counter turned around. "He saved mine too." Even Marcy, the no-nonsense waitress with nerves of steel, stepped forward. "You boys have no idea who you're messing with?" But the three men didn't leave. Not yet. Not until they heard the rest. Eugene set down his fork and looked up. "You ever hold a friend while he bled out in your arms, calling for his mama?" he asked. "You ever get shot at before breakfast?" Silence. You boys want to feel big by tearing down someone quiet. But the truth is, this jacket isn't about me. It's about the ones who never made it home to take theirs off. Luis stepped beside him. You ever get turned away from a job because of the uniform you wore? Told to use a different fountain after risking your life for people who wouldn't even make eye contact with you? The smirks faded. Then came a voice from the back. Ramon, the quiet cook who never spoke unless it was about food. You know baseball? He asked, stepping forward with flour on his apron. Troy nodded. You know Vernon Dorsey? Reggie blinked. Yeah, Stockdale pitcher from way back. He was my cousin, Ramon said. Got drafted, never came home. A landmine took half his chest. He paused. Eugene was the one who carried him back. A man near the window stood, wobbling on crutches. He carried me too, out of a building about to collapse. He could have saved himself, but he came back for me. One by one, the room stood with Eugene, not because he asked for it, but because he had earned it. The three men stood in silence. Their laughter was gone. So was their bravado. In its place was shame, and something else. Maybe respect. Eugene finally folded his napkin, stood slowly, and placed a hand on the table. I didn't come here for a fight, he said. I came for coffee, for pie, for a little peace. He looked each of them in the eyes. The fact that my presence makes you uncomfortable, that's not my burden, that's yours. And with that, he sat back down, took another sip of his coffee, and watched as the three young men quietly backed away and walked out. It was Eugene who carried what was left of Ramon's uncle back to the medic tent that day. He stayed by his side until the end, holding his hand as he took his final breath. He wrote a letter to their family, sent his dog tags home, and never once asked for recognition. Ramon's voice trembled, but he didn't break. My uncle kept that letter in his Bible until the day he died, he said. Eugene didn't speak. He stared into his cold coffee, the steam long gone. Darnell shifted uneasily. All right, okay, we get it. No, you don't, said Marcy, her voice sharp from behind the counter. You think you can just walk into a place like this, toss out insults and mock a man who's lived through more than you'll ever imagine? She stepped forward, her hand trembling as she pointed at Eugene. This man lost more friends in a year than you'll make in a lifetime. Heads began to turn. People who'd been silent were now looking up, making eye contact for the first time. The thick wall of discomfort that had hung in the air began to crack. Louise stepped in before Troy could say anything else. You boys came in here loud, trying to show off. Maybe that works somewhere else, but not here. Reggie mumbled, We didn't know. Louise raised a hand. Number, you didn't want to know. That's different. Eugene finally looked up. His voice was low and calm. You ever wonder what happens when someone who's been through hell chooses peace and gets laughed at for it? Troy looked away. It's not just disrespect, Eugene continued. It's the reminder that no matter how much you give, some people will always try to reduce you to what they think they see. Louis glanced toward the kitchen, then back at Eugene. Should I tell them about the photo? Eugene shook his head. No need. They wouldn't understand it anyway. What photo? Darnell asked, his voice quieter now. Louise hesitated, then said, There's a picture in my dad's safe, taken in '72. Eugene's carrying a wounded child through a burning village. The kid's barefoot, bleeding. Eugene's face is calm, focused. That photo's in a frame, under glass. It's the only thing my dad took with him when we moved restaurants. That kid? He was my uncle. Silence fell over the diner like a heavy fog. You saved his life, Louise said to Eugene. Because of you, he lived long enough to have a family. That family includes me. But even that wasn't the whole story. The part that had never been written in any letter or captured in a photo still sat in the air, unspoken. Louise rested a hand on the back of a chair near Eugene's booth. He didn't sit. He just braced himself, then said quietly, There's something none of you asked. But maybe you should have. Eugene let out a breath, like he didn't want to go on, but knew it was time. He had a wife, Louise said gently. Her name was Margaret. She used to come in here with him, years ago. Sweet lady, wore a gold bracelet every Sunday, even though it was missing a stone. Told me Eugene gave it to her before he shipped out. Eugene didn't look up. His hands stayed flat on the table. She waited for him through 2 tours, Louise went on, held down the house, worked nights, saved pennies to buy a second-hand crib. They were going to start a family. He paused. But Margaret died the day before Eugene came home. Drunk driver ran a red light. She was just trying to get home from her shift. A few quiet gasps echoed from nearby booths. He didn't even know, Louis said. Stepped off the bus ready to start a new life. A neighbor met him with the news. Eugene leaned back slowly, pressing into the booth. His voice was barely audible. We'd already picked a name, he said. Boy or girl, it was going to be Jordan. Didn't matter. Just wanted the baby to be healthy. He swallowed hard. I missed the funeral by 3 hours. Delayed out of Saigon. I never got to say goodbye. Even the loudest among them, Troy, Reggie, and Darnell, were now silent. Troy blinked quickly. Reggie looked at the floor, and Darnell rubbed his hand over his mouth. Marcy stepped from behind the counter with a fresh cup of coffee. She said nothing, just set it gently on the table and gave Eugene's shoulder a quiet squeeze. Louis turned to the three men. So when you mock that jacket, when you laugh at him sitting alone with his coffee, you're mocking a man who's already given more than you'll ever be asked to. Troy finally spoke. I didn't know all that. Eugene gave a tired, quiet laugh. Number you didn't, because you didn't want to. Then from the back of the diner, the old man with crutches chimed in. You didn't know because you never cared to ask. That's the problem. A woman in a leopard print scarf added, You're lucky, boys. You grew up in a world made safer by men like him, and now you act like fools in it. Reggie whispered, We were just messing around. Didn't mean it. Eugene's eyes weren't angry, just deeply, utterly tired. I fought so people could speak freely, he said, but not so they could forget the cost. Louis nodded. Exactly. Troy shifted awkwardly. I'm sorry, all right? Eugene studied him. Don't say sorry just because you got caught. Say it if you're going to carry the truth with you after you leave this place. Troy nodded, unsure but sincere. Reggie stepped forward. We shouldn't have said what we said. I didn't know. Doesn't excuse it, but still. Louis crossed his arms. You came in here looking to laugh at someone. You weren't just joking. You were trying to knock someone down to feel taller. Reggie didn't argue. I know. And you picked the wrong man, Louis continued. Not because he's untouchable, but because he's already survived worse than anything you can throw at him and carried it with dignity. Darnell finally stepped forward. We acted stupid. That's on us. The old man with crutches chuckled. You get it now because the whole town's staring at you. That stung, but it wasn't cruel. It was true. Then something unexpected happened. A teenage girl in a hoodie and Vans stood up from the back booth. She walked over to Eugene and held out a small notebook. Would you mind writing your name? She asked softly. I want to remember it. Eugene looked at her surprised. He took the notebook gently, as if it were glass. Then he picked up Marcy's pen and wrote, Eugene Marshall, Infantry, 101st Airborne Division. She held the notebook like it was a treasure, then went back to her seat without another word. And just like that, the diner softened. People looked at Eugene not as some quiet old man, but as someone fully seen, someone finally understood. Louis turned to the three men. So, what now? Troy glanced around. We leave? Louis nodded. That would be best. Darnell led the way. Reggie followed, shoulders slumped. Troy paused, turned back. If you ever wanted to talk to someone, he said to Eugene, or tell more of your story, I'd listen. Eugene gave a slow, tired smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes but didn't have to. Then start by listening to the people around you, he said. This place is full of stories. All you need is ears and humility. Troy nodded faintly and followed the others out. This time they didn't slam the door. They closed it gently. Louise looked at Eugene. You okay? Eugene looked out the window. The morning sun had shifted. I'm fine, he said. Didn't expect to teach a history lesson today, but life had other plans. And though the boys were gone, Eugene still had one more thing to say, this time, for everyone who stayed. He thought about going back to Lou's diner, maybe tomorrow, maybe with his mother, to say something face to face, but he wasn't sure if it would matter. By the time that thought settled, Eugene had already been gone for hours. his meal long finished. The seat where he sat, still empty. Nobody dared sit there, not out of fear, but out of respect, like sitting there would disturb something sacred. Marcy wiped the table twice anyway, not because it was dirty, but like she was clearing away more than crumbs, humming softly, as if her cloth could sweep away the weight of the day. Across the room, Luis stayed late, still at the counter, elbows resting on the worn formica, turning it all over in his mind. "You all right?" Marcy asked, pouring him coffee without being asked. He nodded slowly. "Just thinking about Eugene, about everything." She set the mug down gently. "We see so much these days, videos, headlines, hashtags, but when it happens right in front of you, it feels different." Louis stared into his coffee. "Made me realize how many times I've stayed quiet." Marcy didn't respond right away. Then in a soft voice, "We all have." For a few minutes they just sat in the silence. A spoon clinked, a chair creaked, and somehow in the quiet stillness of Bakersfield, something began to shift. The moment was bigger than the town itself, and across town, that shift continued. The girl with the notebook, her name was Hannah Rhodes, posted Eugene's quote online. "You don't have to go to war to be brave." Within hours it spread. Teachers shared it. A local veterans group reposted it. Someone printed it out and pinned it to the library bulletin board. People didn't know Eugene's full story, but they felt the truth in his words. And that truth began to move. It moved into how folks greeted each other, with more care, a slower kindness. It moved into the way regulars at Lou's tipped the staff, with a little more thank you in their tone. It even reached a high school history class where a student named Andre pulled up Eugene's photo and asked, "Can we learn about people like him for a change?" Meanwhile, Eugene's own life hadn't changed much. He still lived in that one-story house with the peeling paint and the porch that creaked just right. That night, instead of coffee, he sipped tea in his old recliner, jacket folded neatly over the back. He didn't know his name was trending, didn't know people were Googling him, quoting him, talking about him. He didn't care. What mattered to him was simpler. If even one person carried what happened into how they treated the next stranger, then it was enough. Because respect isn't a trend, and kindness doesn't need a camera. But the story didn't end there. By Thursday, the story had taken on a life of its own. Eugene didn't use social media, barely touched his flip phone. But when he stopped by the pharmacy to pick up his prescription, the young cashier, tattoos peeking from his sleeves, handed over the receipt and said, "Thank you for what you did, Mr. Marshall." Eugene blinked. "What did I do?" The kid smiled. "You stood up without raising your voice. My mom read the story to me. She cried." Eugene shook his head gently. "I just had breakfast." But things were different. At the grocery store, a nurse in scrubs handed him a folded note that read, "You reminded me how powerful quiet strength can be." Outside the post office, an older man in a denim jacket saluted him. It wasn't textbook military perfect, but it meant something. And back at Lou's that Sunday, his booth was already set. Napkin, utensils, and a single white lily in a small glass vase. "Don't get used to flowers," Marcy teased. "You ain't royalty." But the shift was real. When Eugene sat down, people didn't look away anymore. They nodded, spoke. A man in his 30s walked up, a little boy trailing behind him. "Mr. Marshall?" "Yes. I just wanted to say thank you. My son saw the video. I used it to teach him that you can stand tall without putting others down." Eugene smiled at the boy. "What's your name?" "Caleb," the child said, a little shy. "You treat people right, Caleb." "I try," the boy replied. "Keep doing that. Trying's the whole point." The man shook Eugene's hand, firm, grateful, and left with his son. Louis brought over pie and coffee, then slid into the seat across from him. "You all right?" he asked. Eugene nodded. "Seems like I started something I didn't mean to." Louis grinned. Maybe it needed to start. They sat for a moment before Eugene asked, "How's your uncle?" "You remember that?" "Of course. He's good. Retired last year. Still talks about that picture. Still tells people how you saved his life." Eugene looked out the window. "We were both lucky that day." A few booths down, Hannah waved her notebook. Louise nodded toward her. "She's been in here every day. Says she wants to learn more. about carrying something heavy and still walking tall. Eugene chuckled. Tell her to bring stronger shoes. Later that week, the local school hosted a veterans breakfast. Pancakes, coffee, no speeches, just company. Eugene showed up last, as usual. But when he walked in, the entire room stood. Not to show off, just out of recognition. Even Troy was there. He didn't say anything, just walked over, laid an envelope on Eugene's table, and left. Inside was a note. I disrespected someone who deserved more than I'll ever understand. I'm sorry. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just hoping I can be better. TD Eugene read it twice, folded it, and tucked it inside his jacket. He didn't need to frame it. The words were enough.